Hi everyone, welcome to Legal Operations Council of Cimplifi, and I'm really happy to see everyone. I've said it a million times, I'm going to say it again. This is the most beautiful community of legal and technology people anywhere in the world. So I thank you for coming and being part of our presentation today. I have with me Ari Kaplan. Ari, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Ari Kaplan. I am an analyst that covers the legal industry, and I was very privileged to conduct this research with Cimplifi. I'm so excited to be here, although I'm going to click the leave button in 30 minutes, so be at it. No, I'm just kidding. I'm so excited to be back.
So Cimplifi, our company, we used to be called Compliance. We rebranded. Our vision, our idea is that eDiscovery and contract analytics lifecycle management are not that different, that it is a continuum. You could think of it as it was eDiscovery expanded into InfoGov, which expanded into privacy, and now I feel like the next step on our collective EDRM is contract analytics lifecycle management. So we are growing our brand, we are growing our company at the convergence of eDiscovery and what we call COM, others call CLM. So we hired Ari, who everybody knows and is really the premier analyst in the legal technology world, to do a study for us, to take our hypothesis and interview some of the most prominent legal operations professionals in our industry. Our idea was that there is market demand for contract analytics lifecycle management, and it's very similar to where we were with eDiscovery 10 to 15 years ago. I was there at the beginning of eDiscovery 10 to 15 years ago, maybe even a little longer, but we don't have to pinpoint it exactly. And I see so much that is the same, that excitement, the differences are so small between those two fields. So what are those? There's really a lack of standardized best practices today for CLM. We have a lot of tech choices and not really one best in breed that's come to the forefront. There's not that many people who are experts in CLM. And so our hypothesis was, if we use the foundations of eDiscovery, what we all knew from back in the day of starting those practices, AI, analytics, workflows, the knowledge of the legal aspects of our businesses, teamwork, we can, as legal ops professionals, bring this new discipline into our best practices and expand the value of our brand and the value of our team's brand. So Ari, tell me, what do you see as important in the rise of legal ops generally today?
I want to pause for a second because about 11 years ago, I did a report called The Evolution of the Legal Profession, and it was kind of designed to spotlight what was happening. It was actually the vision of Cimplifi's chairman, Steve Harbour. And as we fast forward a decade, many of the things that Marla was just reciting to you have really come to fruition just in terms of this convergence of talents and convergence of trends. So what you're looking at here is kind of the general scope of the people that I spoke with. I often tell the story that when I was a kid, my dad used to make me hold the flashlight whenever he had to do something. He had to do plumbing, electrical, I don't know if anyone else ever had this situation? Your parent asked you, all right, so my dad, I see Doug there, I would imagine that's true for Doug. So my dad would always ask me to hold the flashlight, and I would always say, why do I have to do this? Oh, you know, I want you to stand there, I want you to hold the flashlight. I'd hold the flashlight, as I got older, I really didn't like it. Sometimes he'd make me do it outside, and I'd wonder, why does he need me to hold the flashlight when I'm outside? And only as an adult now do I realize that my dad never needed the light. right? He just wanted me to learn, to see what he was doing. And I have this remarkable privilege of talking to folks who have built up this level of trust. I'm actually really excited that when you look at the report, many of them have acknowledged the fact that they contributed, and I'm so grateful to them. But we're ultimately trying to capture a cross-section of organizations in, as you can see, highly regulated institutions, folks that are driving tremendous revenue, have significant employee bases. And I wrote an article in 2015 for the ACC docket about like this new role. Chief of Staff, they called it, Chief Operations Officer. They didn't really have a great name for it. Now it's become obviously a solidified situation. And so when you think about what is this is an incredibly holistic champion of so many different disciplines within the law department. Any law department of a meaningful size and meaningful impact, it has somebody that is responsible for legal operations. And a lot of the things that they talked about was, some of these folks are starting in eDiscovery, some in contracts, some in technology, but ultimately they're curious, multifaceted, disciplined, just an incredible group of folks who can figure things out, who are showing their senior leaders in the law department, what they're doing, having them, hold the flashlight. I think that's a really important element of what we're seeing now.
Yes, so I've said this before if anyone has talked to me recently, and I come clean because I think I was actually in this room years ago when I was a panelist and I said, eDiscovery as a career path is dead. So I'd like to apologize today and admit that I was wrong. eDiscovery as a career pathway was not dead. In fact, it was the springboard for this new group of legal operations professionals who you spoke with for our report, who have these fundamental skills that we enumerated earlier, and really took that to grow an entire professional path. So indeed, it has changed, it has morphed, but it certainly is not dead. So I apologize. I try to do that every time I speak on a panel because I know there were people who were actually kind of ticked off at me.
Well, when I started speaking to legal operations leaders, they would, usually I'd say, how have things changed? How is the law department being managed? And I'd kind of slip in an eDiscovery question. And I'd say, so what about eDiscovery? Why would you ask me about eDiscovery? I was in finance and real estate, and now here I am. And I would say, I'm sorry, but do you have an answer? And they wouldn't really have an answer. And then, of course, years later, there's this incredible sophistication, although, frankly, you could ask that question about AI or contracts or any other number of topics, and they can somehow recite, fantastic statistics on it.
So legal ops professionals are professionals who live and work at the intersection of law and business. This is really important because historically, I think there were silos between the legal department and the business side. But what legal ops professionals do so well is they bridge that gap. And legal ops professionals are not just lawyers. They are lawyers, they are technologists, they are project managers, they are people who are strategic, they are people who see an opportunity to fix something, make something more efficient, to answer key questions to serve an enterprise's objectives. They understand business, they understand law, they understand technology, and they really understand teamwork, and teamwork on a cross-divisional basis. So, Ari, with that, tell us, what did you learn about the evolving role of legal operations?
Oh boy. Can I just pause for a second and ask you guys a question? Is anybody here in a legal operations role? All right, 2. Fair enough. How many people here are, is anybody here in a law department? So several law department leaders. A law firm? Interesting. Service provider? Technology provider? I'm trying to... and media? Oh boy, here we go. Okay. So I just want to get a sense
You
of...
need to behave.
I know. Wow, I lost that in the first few seconds. So, you know, really what we tried to do was we tried to understand how are you leveraging technology, what has happened to the role of a legal operations leader, where has that changed, how has it expanded? You know, we've seen this in eDiscovery, we've seen this in contracts management, we see the growth of CLM, and so I was trying to figure out in terms of the legal operations leaders, where have things changed? How have you shifted? How has the pandemic, that was a big source of the conversation because I conducted these in the fourth quarter, like how are you adapting? What's happening to the role as a remote, you know, kind of role? You know, this is a person who sits at the center of the entire law department, and as you saw, lots of these organizations are large, complex, tremendous budgets. What's happening here? And what we found was that they were incredibly adaptable. Like they adapted to not only the shift in terms of how they work, but the issues that arose. You know, many of us who were in legal, certainly studying legal technology in March of 2020, April 2020, you know, we're wondering, I did a lot of research on law firm finances, on the shift in corporate legal department, how that landscape is changing, and people were concerned. You know, I interviewed a lot of people for my podcast, and there was a lot of anxiety. And then very quickly, people just sort of righted that ship. They got onto you know, firm footing, and you see, the challenge here is that the role is shifting in a way that legal operations has to lead. So the law department may come behind it, but legal operations is trying to figure out how do we show, how do we identify where we have to go. And I'm guessing my friends here who are in legal operations would agree to this, that in some ways it's this hybrid of knowledge management, you know, from a law firm, and like a hybrid eDiscovery IT. Marla and I were up here, I don't remember how many years ago, and I just want to say how honored I am to be working with Marla. I do a lot of research on different brands, and one of the comments people had about Cimplifi was that they've brought on this incredible team of leaders, including my friend Marla here. So I think that's an important thing to acknowledge. When you see some of the statistics really identify in terms of a responsibility for information governance, a responsibility for eDiscovery, a responsibility for contracts and analytics. It's not just a siloed role that is responsible for management or administration in some respect that it might have been 6-8 years ago, certainly in the years before clock when there was an East Coast. I don't know if anybody knows this, but you know, there's a West Coast constituency of legal operations leaders that ended up becoming clock. There's an East Coast group from, let's say, the financial services, insurance group, you know, like the Biggie and Tupac of legal operations is really how this community got started. And, you know, all very talented, but a very funny distinction. And I've actually, it's sort of represented in some ways in the report.
What do you think about the way legal ops professionals have really embraced technology? Because to me, that's what separates a true like eDiscovery professional, legal ops professional, contract analytics professional from just a lawyer. I don't say just, I was just a lawyer, but just a lawyer who's working in an organization. There is this special combination with technology. Did you see that in the people that you interviewed, that they were early adopters?
You know, it's so interesting that we're having this conversation about the need to adopt technology, right? I wrote reports last year on very specific areas of eDiscovery collection, to using technology for assessments to manage the very hot talent market in legal, both in law departments and in corporations, I mean, in law firms. I did research on so many different topics on financial intelligence, and the idea of, well, some people are using technology, some people aren't. I don't think I need to say this, that if you're not using technology, you know, your success level has already reached its threshold. And I think that these individuals not only embraced it, but embraced it in a way that makes it accessible. The idea of leveraging technology is not the issue. The idea of proposing that we should use technology in some respect in the law department is not the issue. It's gaining adoption, it's maybe facilitating that implementation. A lot of law departments, what's interesting, what we've seen here and what I've seen over the years, this is my 5th report focusing on legal operations over the years, and what's interesting is that in in terms of usage of the cloud, for example, legal operations were very early to embrace that because it gives you a sense of independence. You have much greater control if the platform, let's say, for example, in many instances, is cloud-based. If it's an on-premises system, then the IT department is responsible. Then you have to go through some other layers of control and access and expansion. But in many ways, what they're trying to do is leverage technology in a way that allows for full independence and driving the vision of the law department forward.
So that is definitely how we got our start, right, as eDiscovery professionals. It was adopting technology to get the business of law done. But then, I think, things evolved for us. And our next topic, in the absence of consistent structure, standards and playbooks are key. And I think that legal ops professionals realized early on that they needed to develop some rigor. They needed to develop these repeatable, defensible processes so that they could show their value. And eDiscovery professionals have seen sort of this kind of contract analytics rodeo before, because they were often at the inception of eDiscovery trying to take that rigor and put it onto something that needed to be done again and again. The other thing I think that legal ops professionals, eDiscovery professionals, call professionals are really good at is identifying something that they know how to do that is a bit mysterious to others. Others are afraid of it, they don't want to do it, and they jump at it. They adopt it, they work at it, they socialize it, and that's how they can show their value. A lot of us started doing things that no one else wanted to do, and we made a career out of that, and it has been hugely successful. And I think we're at that pivot point right now with contracts analytics, lifecycle management, because we see the issues, we see these similar problems. It's a daunting issue. People don't really want to tackle it, but we have done it before, we know how to do it, and we're really excited because we feel if we solve this problem, we'll be able to show our value, show our team's value, and have even greater success than we did when we started in the eDiscovery world. So, the key is really to figure out where this fits in your enterprise. What did you learn about this rigor, about workflows, playbooks, sort of the bread and butter of a legal ops professional?
To your point about this kind of evolution from eDiscovery, whenever you'd ask a leader in a law department, what kind of person do you want to be supporting your team? Someone who can manage a significant budget but not go over budget, someone who can manage tremendous amounts of data, someone who can manage cross-border this and voluminous that, and it just sort of describes somebody that has experience in eDiscovery. So it wasn't surprising to me that so many people were coming from eDiscovery into legal operations or developing a leading role. The thing that was funny to me about a playbook and about some sort of guidelines was that the idea of who owns certain responsibilities within a law department was very, there was an issue associated with who's owning what data, who's owning what responsibility, who owns contracts. Oh, I think it should be procurement. No, it should be legal. I don't think it should be legal. Legal doesn't want contracts. Legal wants to negotiate, but they don't want the management of the agreement. They don't want it. Do you have visibility into your portfolio of contracts? I really don't have visibility, but Bob may have visibility, Susan, and it was just this weird, it was as much as the law department has a cohesive structure, there are a lot of silos in terms of who has responsibility for what. And with a playbook or some sort of organized template for how things are done, you can follow it. The other thing is there's been a lot of movement. The talent market is shifting. Even in law departments and law firms, you're seeing this, that people are switching. And so if I bring an institutional knowledge and then I take it away, if I don't have something that I can follow, it turns out to be a significant issue for my team. And so you see that there is this impetus to develop some structure around how we operate, how our organization operates, and of course there's a risk management issue. I mean, litigation changed over the course of the pandemic, but it's certainly about to roll back. That's the plan.
So like eDiscovery, some of it lived in the Office of General Counsel or litigation or finance. Where are the places that this sort of contract lifecycle management can live in an organization? Where are people seeing it? And do legal ops professionals want it or do they not want it?
Part of the question, I think the initial question that you need to ask in this situation is how can legal operations maintain it? Predominantly, I mean overwhelmingly, the legal operations groups, even at the sizes of the companies that I spoke to and even at the names of the organizations that are listed in the acknowledgments, those teams are predominantly small. You're talking about several people, sometimes 1 or 2 people, and you're talking about a level of responsibility that's enormous. And so that's one of the reasons why they're leveraging technology, and it's also a reason why there was some disagreement on who should actually own some of these things. Do they have the talent, the capability? Are they familiar with the technology? Of course. The question is, how much can they possibly do? You know, they've become the go-to individuals. Oh, send it to Susan. She can do anything. And that's true, but Susan's only human, right? And so if Susan's team is only 2 people or 4 people, that's a big issue. There were definitely organizations that were outliers. They had 40 people in legal ops, 50 people in legal ops, or legal ops also would formally contain some people in other disciplines. But that is something that I think we will continue to try to figure out. And organizations are trying to figure out. I'm sure it's going to be a topic at Clock, and I just get the sense that this is an issue that people are trying to manage.
There's definitely a tension between wanting it and not wanting it, right? So you want it because you see it as a career path enhancer. You know you can use the tools you learned in eDiscovery on this sort of tangential set of data and do a great job and show the value, but maybe you know, you're super busy already. Our team's expanding. What is the market like for legal operations?
So the interesting thing about technology is that it actually allows you to maintain the size of your team, right? Used properly, you can maintain the size of your team and get more done. For the people that are bringing on new people, they're expanding them with individuals in data analytics or some kind of data science. And all, you know, and another reason why there's this interesting connection with eDiscovery, right? Because eDiscovery started using AI much earlier than any other discipline, and all of a sudden, these individuals have that experience. They can apply it now in a way that they were applying it 5 years ago, or 8 years ago, or 10 years, right? And so I think that it's really important to be thinking about this. Those teams may or may not expand, but the sophistication of the team members is certainly, you know, expanding.
I should say, if anyone has any questions along the way, just interrupt us. We're happy to talk to you as we speak to each other. So please, if you have any questions, just let us know. We're going to leave time at the end, but if something comes up, happy to, you know, tackle it as it comes up. Technology, ROI, and adoption remains a challenge. This is what I would call, okay, so if it was easy, anyone could do it, but it takes a national champion legal ops professional to get a handle on how to show your value. I think how to show your value is what we as legal ops professionals, eDiscovery professionals, comm professionals have to do best. It is sometimes, you know, not a cost center, but we have to show how the technology is making something better, how our roles are fixing something, doing something more efficiently, more effectively. And we are better than most people in an enterprise at showing our return on investment. So tell us, Ari, moving on to the next slide. There are challenges to this. What did you learn from the people you interviewed?
So you can see here, right, they're talking about challenges in terms of integrating new tools, success, this issue of gauging success in so many different reports that I produced over the last couple of years. How do you measure success? What are metrics that you're using to show your results? How is success defined in your organization? In some organizations, success is defined by just not getting in trouble. Or we didn't spend as much money as the next department, or the business units didn't have an issue here or there. That's not a meaningful way to define success in many areas. I practiced for some years, and you would define it by a number. Your bill of time or success for the client. There was some way, but in the law department, it was much more elusive. It was a very interesting series of conversations, and everyone would the wonderful thing about the research that I do is all qualitative for the most part, and so I'm having conversations with people. And so there's a lot that you learn in the sigh, or the pause, or the laugh, the initial laughter, and then, they start speaking, oh, where do I begin? And sometimes in my notes I'll put, ha ha ha, where do I begin? And just so I know what the tone was of that conversation. But the determining what great looks like is still a challenge. And while we were all working remotely, the focus was to sort of get the work done, as opposed to we should use this tool, we should implement this, we should come up with a more holistic process. And so now, as we were having these conversations and people were returning, they were talking about, well, if we had a playbook about this, what have we done? Let's regroup. And now that we're in person, that is accelerating that process of determining, okay, this is what we did, this is how we did it well, this is what success looks like, let's repeat. And is there a tool that you were using that made sense for you? The answer was, in many ways, yes.
It's so important. I was in a meeting yesterday with Charles Post, our head of contract analytics at our company, speaking with some folks who were in a very senior legal ops position, looking to expand their brand into contracts. And this was the key topic. Okay, if I go out of my way to take this on, can you help me show the value? So in eDiscovery, we're good at that. Like at our company, we have a whole dashboard in our ecosystem that can show you your spend. We can help in eDiscovery show anyone how their value has improved their enterprise. And now that's sort of the next thing, I think, in COM is we are trying to help our clients to show their value so that their professional position in the enterprise is enhanced by this. Because it really is quite an opportunity, but if you can't figure out how to shout it from the top of the building that you work in, it's just more work.
I've had conversations with my peers on my virtual lunch. I was wondering how many minutes it would take me to talk about my virtual lunch, but so I've had conversations about this.
About 29.
Yeah, did it take 29? So, and the reason I bring it up is because over the years, so I've been doing this, I practiced for nearly 9 years, and I've been doing this in June, it'll be 16 years that I'm on my own. And I've always said, if you build a certain level of trust and capability in a particular role, and I've always said, I think people would buy more things from me if I had more to sell them. And because it would just be the same kind of good work, it would be expansive, it would be thinking about their value, but I work for myself. Like that's the whole point, is to figure out ways to grow a business. But when you're practicing at a firm, you have to grow a practice, and as an individual, you want to grow your career. And the best way to do it is to upskill, to identify something that is ancillary to what you're doing, and as things change, be the person who's familiar, at least minimally familiar with what that is. And one of the things that came out of a lot of these conversations is, yes, our team is studying the value of contract analytics. Our team is studying the value of broader AI. Our organization has a working group that's associated with AI. Our law department has a working group. I'm chairman of the working group. Really, who's on that working group? Me? And like Susan, but we have a working group, and the chief legal officer asks us, What are you learning in the working group? Oh, we were at Legalweek and we spoke to a bunch of different organizations and we met Charles Post, the master of using AI in contract, right? So they will know that you are the person to think about, even if your level of knowledge is pretty minimal, because nobody has any level of knowledge in some of these areas. And so I think this is a really important point. It's not surprising that you're starting to have conversations with people who are asking, well, if we add this to our portfolio, can you support us? Because that, I know we have a slide on this, right? But that was a big part of some of these conversations. Are you seeing crossover? Do you ask a vendor that you're traditionally thinking of in one discipline for help in another discipline? And if that vendor doesn't have that capability, it's a huge lost opportunity. But if we were to drill it down to we as individual workers or business owners or whatever, of professionals, you also want to be able to answer that question and be able to find a way to, years ago there was when the internet was sort of just starting. I graduated in '97, so I'm hopefully older than I look. And so I remember they were talking about in the future, the person who knows how to find the answer will be as valuable or more valuable than the person who has the answer. And so, of course, when my kids were little, they thought that Google was a man who lived in our attic. They'd always say, can we go ask Google? And I'd be like, no, we're not going to ask Google. But I think that that's a really important point. Are you the Google of your organization, right? Will people come to ask you, and you know how to find the answer? I think the research and your conversations are really bringing that to fruition.
The other thing I've heard yesterday and even this morning is, so here's the truth. We went out and bought this technology, and we own it now, but to be honest, we're not entirely sure how to leverage it, and it's not doing everything we really thought it was going to do. Can you help? Did you see that in talking to your audience, that they bought technology and now they're at that point where it's like a little dicey what to do next?
The responsibility for technology, the individuals who have some touch of responsibility for technology, has expanded in many ways, I think, because they want to share the responsibility for who decided, it was a committee decision to bring on this tool that nobody's using. And I think that was common. It's not limited to legal operations. I've interviewed law firm partners, corporate counsel, talent leaders. Cybersecurity leaders. This is a common refrain. Hey, we bought technology, we don't know how to use it, or people aren't adopting it in a way that they should maximize the value of that. So again, either having a trusted partner or being that trusted individual or knowing how to showcase the tips and tricks of a particular application, hugely valuable. People looking for that. Again, why the expanding roles tend to be in some kind of data science, an ability to find answers, an ability to leverage some of the metrics that people are gathering in ways that can help them create predictability, drive value, and manage finances.
I have a question. Sorry.
Catherine.
Sort of thank you, Marla. On your last point, I'm a believer you gotta have that plan before you purchase the product. That's a whole different story. So in what you're talking about, perhaps Marla, you're touching on this. So the technology introduction, bringing it in, did anyone speak to you about how they go about budgeting and getting the money for it? And I talk on a corporate, not a law firm structure, right? Is it legals? Is it the business? Is it ops? Is it sort of, and I know it could be dissected in many ways, but I'm curious to know what did you see to be the trend?
So the question is, just in case everyone can't hear it from Catherine, is, okay, so you're going to go out and get this technology, but basically, how are you going to pay for it? Where does the budgeting come from? So Ari, did you speak to that in your report?
So there was often a fundamental, and I don't know if you're seeing this in your department, but there's a fundamental distinction between kind of legal technology that facilitates what the job is of the legal department, and maybe even a CLM application that would facilitate the business unit's activities. And so if it's facilitating contracting that's driving the business, then the business unit would be required to at least be the champion of that if it's coming out of someone's, but legal would try not to have it come out of its budget, but the idea of bringing procurement and the business unit and maybe even someone, IT certainly, but maybe even someone outside, just slightly related, compliance or some other information governance, data risk, like someone that could also, so that there's so many more people that could potentially get value out of this, then you spread it around, you share it. That wasn't as common, it's become increasingly common. I think there's much greater scrutiny over budgets, there's much more information that's available. There are people who are asking the question, why did we buy this? And if we bought it, why is it so expensive? I have a cloud-based X or Y, it costs me $19 a month, can't we do that? And I think that the different, so it's not just, so it's interesting you brought that up, it's not just whose budget is it coming out of, it's also, can we pay for it differently? Is there some other new pricing structure that is working for us, that works for other organizations? And that's the other thing, they're asking their peers, which is one of the reasons why they participate in the report, actually. They're always like, well, I get the research, will you talk to me about this? And so it's, we're all very interested in what others are saying so that we can learn. As a community, we want to raise each other up.
And in our division, in our practice, we see some of our clients are buying it on an enterprise level. So, it's at the C-suite decision making, we're gonna buy this on an enterprise level, and every division has to use this. But we're also seeing it on a divisional level. So, if it's a very large organization, one division, is buying one solution. Another division is buying a different solution. And that is also causing challenges that we're trying to help normalize in very large organizations. I mean, we'll have to set you up with Charles who can tell you how to do it best, but there are very different use cases in an organization. Procurement and ISDAs are vastly different. And so
that's all we talk about at dinner.
Procurement and ISDA.
My kids, procurement and ISDA, so different. I know, Dad.
We'll hire them if they want to work at Cimplifi.
But to your point is a good one because was it? I hate to bring up quotes and misquote people. Was it Henry Ford said you can have this car in any color as long as it's black, right? And so I think that the idea of an organization mandating or not mandating the use of an application, standardizing across teams is a key issue. A lot of folks told me, like, well, we can buy something, but they don't have to use it. And if they don't have to use it, then you're unlikely to get kind of universal implementation. And that's a challenge. So one thing that you want to be thinking about if you're adopting new technology, if you're suggesting something new, somebody needs to own that, which is, as I showed you, a challenge. Nobody wants to, it's like a hot potato in some respect. And if they do, you want to make sure that there's no other option, that they can't try something else, and you have to have that's centralized. And that's, again, another reason why the legal operations role has become so fundamental to the law department, because they sit at the center. They're the most familiar, they have the greatest relationships with the different constituents, and they really understand typically the technology or the vendor landscape, and if they don't, they're very good at recognizing that and then bringing in that expertise, that subject matter support.
One of the other things I think that brings eDiscovery professionals over to contract lifecycle is the issue of, do you know where your data is? So as eDiscovery professionals, that was our bread and butter at the beginning. Do you know where your data is? Data mapping, understanding where the evidence was, the information, the discovery. So we became really good at cross-divisional communication because we had to find the stuff and no one knew where it was. And that was really, now we're calling it InfoGov, but really at the beginning, that was a big job of an eDiscovery professional. And now with contracts, we're hearing that from our clients too. We don't know where all our contracts are. They're in boxes, they're on microfiche, they're on share drives. Oh yeah, there was a person who kept all our contracts, but when she retired, we're not really sure where everything went. So I think it's that skill set which should not be underestimated. And how do you see that, or your investigation? How is that driving momentum for CLM?
There are a number of organizations that are getting tremendous value from some sort of CLM approach. And then there are others that don't have the same kind of roadmap, that don't have the same kind of playbook, that aren't driving a cultural shift in how these things have been done. We've had 2 years of people trying to keep their head above water, and maybe not necessarily applying the techniques and leveraging the tools that an organization, they may not even be familiar with it, they may have never met their team members. Has anybody here at this event met someone that they would say they know, but met them for the first time?
Yeah, definitely.
That's not that many hands. All right, there you go. Thank you very much. I would keep my own hand up, and it's been wonderful. But imagine all this time, talking about a significant period of time in isolation, that people have access to a tool and think that they're following a certain set of processes, but realize that either institutionally, as a result of a cultural difference, they're not using it, or maybe their team was acquired and that acquisition they were using something different. You see this a lot. It's increasingly a challenge. And so when we're talking about this, clearly there's growth. I mean, the numbers are striking. People are investing in it, they're adopting it, they expect to get value from it. But then when you ask them about it, they're less certain about what that's going to look like. Whereas if you said, are you going to implement this particular eDiscovery tool, something that may be a little bit more familiar, a little bit more proven, they know it's going to streamline our data, we're going to reduce our cost by X, we know that 15 other companies have done this, if we're going to use a different time tracking application, there's a certain history to some of these things. Whereas in this instance, some people are doing this for the first time, and they are very unfamiliar with the full universe of where that data resides.
So what do we do? From our experience, what we know, we use AI and analytics and technology to make sense of the mess that is before us. And that's what we did as eDiscovery professionals. We were so early to adopt AI and analytics, right? Because we had to get our job done. We had to get through all of the volume. And we saw, even in the case law, in the evolution, Judge Peck will discuss with anybody who will listen, and was really the founding father of the AI and analytic adoption, that people started what I would call like the fear and loathing of AI to the adoption and reliance today on AI and artificial intelligence analytics and eDiscovery. So how are we seeing the power of that being harnessed to make sense of this new data set, this new mess that we legal ops professionals see, the contracts?
Can I ask for a show of hands, how many people are meaningfully using AI in their work? Well, yeah, right. I'm asking you because then we'd go down a rabbit hole, I feel like. But so would you would you say yes? Okay, so in any way that you define whatever I just said, raise your hand just one more time. Are you using AI? Do you feel like you're using AI meaningfully in your work? That's pretty good. That's half. Would you say half?
Yeah.
At least half the audience. I think that is pretty impressive. And the reason I asked this question is because, and the reason I qualified it to say meaningfully, because we use it in some way, right? Spotify has some sort of AI mishmash, right? There's a way that you leverage it in an everyday basis that you may not realize or don't associate with your work, but these quotes were just a few of many. Either there's no experience whatsoever, we're not really sure what to do with it, we'd love to just click a button, but that we're not there yet. Or they're very familiar because you're in eDiscovery and you've been doing this for a long time, but there's still a lot of hesitancy in terms of the results. I wouldn't say we're kind of universally there saying, hey, and nobody asked me do I mean machine learning? Am I talking about natural language processing? There are all these different elements of this that we're discussing, and I think that there's confusion. So just the way that law departments are still struggling with defining success, I think that they're also struggling in terms of defining some of the technology terms that we use. And with AI, I expect to see results in contract analytics, average or below average in terms of contract analysis in certain respects, but clearly every single organization I spoke to is trying to find ways to take advantage of technology that will streamline, simplify, organize their data. It's unquestionable. They're doing it in other parts of their business. These are incredibly large multinational businesses. They're finding ways to leverage it, even in the most simplistic fashion. But of course, now they have this massive data, and they're trying to figure out how to organize it, how to categorize it. So, if you were to ask me, where's it going? They're going to do more of it. Can they prove it now, the value? Not everyone.
Well, that'll bring us to our next topic about gaining
Smooth
momentum.
Segway, that's what they call me. Segway,
Yes.
smooth Segway.
But from my vantage point, it's really very similar technology for what we use in eDiscovery, which is, how we are able in our business to integrate our eDiscovery technology with our contract analytics team and have crossover there, because it really is similar technology. And so I think that's what we're trying to evangelize, is that if you use the analytics and the systems for eDiscovery, you're really just half a step away from being able to use it successfully for contracts. And so that's what we want to talk about, the gaining of the momentum. But the other viewpoint I want you to talk about, if you won't mind, is the other thing legal
What if I minded? Is that like something? You'd be like,
You might be like, I didn't ask that question.
We're talking about ISDA, I'm all in. But this, I don't know.
The other thing legal ops professionals are really good at is wrestling control. Wrestling control from
Big on wrestling.
within your organization and from outside your organization. So taking the control away from other divisions to centralize it, but also taking it outside of the law firms and bringing it inside. So let's talk about that momentum that you segued to so beautifully.
First presentation back, thank you very much. I think that one of the things that is at the foundation of a lot of this is that there is a level of trust that is earned in a role like this that sits at the center of what happens in a law department, in the same way that people stay and, at an event like this, you see people moving, you see vendors changing, but if the vendor or the individual has earned your trust, you will follow them and really take their advice in ways that you may be uncertain of the ultimate result. And I think that what you're seeing here is that a lot of operations professionals have earned that level of trust with their chief legal officer, they've earned that trust with the C-suite, they've earned that trust, very importantly, with other business units, with leaders in procurement. Everyone's career, their budget is dependent on a lot of these decisions. And there has to be someone that is familiar enough and has earned a level of credibility that is valuable enough to help them. And so clearly there is a movement. And I would be curious to see if the folks who are in organizations, if you are trying to do some more things in-house, is that a fair assessment? Like that the law departments are trying to do as much as they can in-house. They recognize, depending on the size, particularly a legal ops team that's generally small in comparison to a litigation team or an eDiscovery team. And you see they're trying to do things in-house, and in fact I think that's another reason why they're adding some of these people in these roles with very specific knowledge, so that they can, if they're not doing the work, they can at least manage and navigate the work a little bit better. So the idea of doing more in-house isn't new, it just happens to be expanding into other areas.
So we're going to move closer to bringing it all together and bringing it home with the synergies that we see in our business between eDiscovery and contract analytics, how these skill sets align, and how we are able to control consistency across an enterprise by using the skills that are really just what's our bread and butter. So tell us about, if you're familiar with AI and eDiscovery, are people using those skills to apply it to this new area? Are there shareable components? What did you learn from your study?
Has anybody here picked up any new skills, professional skills, while while you've been at home, whatever, over the last couple of years? Anybody pick up any new professional skills, in the workplace? What do you people been doing? Like 4 people raising their hand. Okay, so of those people who picked those up, I see this lady, she's like, kinda. Are you leveraging them? Have you found an opportunity to leverage them in this sort of new era?
Yes.
Thank you so much for raising your hand. Do you want to tell us anything about that?
Well, and how to use AI to analyze contracts. Still early stage.
Yeah.
Plenty of opportunities. All your contracts.
So, great point. So just, sort of the value of using it. My suggestion is to spend this kind of transitional period, is it fair to call it that? Whatever we're in now, this like re-emergence, and try to identify the places where you see some gaps. And think about what has the technology landscape within your organization, what has shifted? What does it look like? Where has it changed? And where can you, at a minimum, let other people know that something has changed? There's something new happening, there's some additional value, and then be that person, that champion of that discussion. And that really came out. And the part of this research that was so much fun to ask about was just sort of, if you could find someone that did all these different things, would you work with them? Oh, that would be great if someone did everything. But then they'd be like, then all the, this is like me, the Larry David inside you would be like, it's not possible to have someone who does everything. That's a lie, that's a trick, that can't be possible, right? And so I think that was what was happening. They would say yes, and then they'd say, nah, it's a trick, I don't understand it. And so the data really showed that if I would love to have someone do everything. I'm not sure that I had someone do everything, but as Marla said, somebody asked her, could you do something else? And they said, yeah, we could. Let's have a conversation about it, and let's kind of push to create some momentum toward it. You as an individual, you as your organization. There are lots of opportunities now because we're kind of in this weird transitional phase where you get to choose what the next step looks like. You get to add something to your portfolio that people might not know that you do or are familiar with. And you get to kind of say you are familiar with it, even if you're not totally familiar with it, because there's still this uncertainty. And then you just become familiar with it, and we have great data.
Yeah, what we saw in our company when we spun up our new division in contract analytics was that the skills that our eDiscovery PMs had was very easily translated into contract analytics. And we actually hired some folks out of law firms who were PMing eDiscovery projects in some of the major law firms in the country to come into the contract analytics division to expand their professional timeline, to learn something new, to become a little bit different, a little bit expanded in what they can do. And it was the same skills. So that is, our model is we can do the eDiscovery, we can do the contract analytics, we can understand your enterprise, and we have the project managers and the technology that can go across both to just really help your enterprise be as focused on using tech and doing a good job as we can. So I'm glad, this is my favorite slide, that 61% of your respondents
My favorite was
saw
the pictures.
our vision.
That was my favorite slide. No, but one of the things that I think is really important to recognize is that this idea is also very empowering for your team. So I was very lucky to work at a law firm where my mentor, the partner I worked directly with, would always ask me how things were going. Would I like to do something else? And I would, let's say I would be reading deposition transcripts, and I'd say, I'd like to take a deposition. And she'd say, next deposition is yours. And then I'd say, I'd like to argue a motion. And she'd say, next motion is yours. The most extraordinary mentor you could ever wish for. And this is the same thing. If I'm an eDiscovery project manager, super important, direct frontline contact with the client, and I say, I would love to do something more unique. I would love to get a different exposure. Contract on a great segue, I'm the segue expert here, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it's really important to recognize that not only does it make sense from a productivity standpoint, it makes sense from a workflow standpoint, but people want to get that additional experience. They want to be able to then gain that subject matter expertise in the organization because it will lead to promotion, and it also allow you to retain the talent that you're trusting with new projects. I segued to the career thing.
You did great.
Okay.
So this is a hard copy of Ari's report that we had him ask all of these 30 legal ops professionals these questions, and we put it into this report that's obviously available at our booth. But you can also scan the QR codes on the placards on the side and get it that way. If you go to our website, cimplifi.com, there's a pop-up. You can also download it there. We would love for you to use our report to further the expansion of your career. We'd love to help you with that, anything we can do. We find this to be a very exciting new topic. Ari, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for participating in this. It is always the most fun when I get to spend time with you. And so we'll open it up if anyone has any questions, but thank you for your participation and your attention. Questions?
Can I share one thing before we go? The last part of this thing was about your career, and one thing I will encourage you to do as you're we're all re-emerging, as we're getting a chance to see our friends again and collaborate, is to ask people, both what they would like to add to their remit and what they would like to remove from their remit. Because the remove part gives you an opportunity, maybe you can take that over, and the add part will just sort of spark some discussion. It kind of gets people talking about how their careers are shifting and how you may be able to find something that elevates where you are into where you'd like to be. So I also want to say thank you to the legal operations leaders who were kind to talk to me and share their insights, and of course to the Cimplifi team, to Marla, to Steve Harbour back there, and to Jill for giving me this privilege. It's really an honor. So thank you.
I think we're at time, so we're good. Thank you guys both so much.
Awesome.